Welcome to the ESAE peer-to-peer session on generations in the not-for-profit environment. Generations, for us, as we are looking at them, brilliant. Thank you so much, Stefania, for the microphones. Actually, yes, I can probably take one as well. Thank you. One of the questions I was asked just recently with regard to this particular presentation is like, how do you define generations? And obviously, we all know when we're talking about the baby boomers, the Gen X's, the Gen Y's, the millennials, and so on and such. And that is one way of looking at generations, of course. If I may just have a quick demographic look here, because I see that we do share probably a relatively good span over generations here. I guess that we do not have anybody from the GI generation here, 87 years and older, in this room. No. Okay. Let's go a bit younger, 69 to 86 years. The traditionalists, no, probably not either. We have a couple of baby boomers, 51 to 60, no? Okay, very good. Then I think most of us are the Gen X's, the 30 to 50-year-olds here in this room. Is that so? Good, very good. That's a good, solid generation, actually. Is there anybody 11 to 29 years old, generation-wise? Okay, we have a couple of representatives too. And I guess we don't have anybody younger than that. So that's also very much taken. But okay, what does that mean for us when we are looking at the business environment that we are in, the associations? In associations, I'm putting this now all a little bit under civic engagement, because this is, no matter how we define our associations, this is something that we do. We do all work for organizations that have some social goal in the end of the day, whether it is representing a profession, whether it is representing an interest group, whether it is representing a sports club. It has a social reason. And it is, in a certain sense, therefore, also civic engagement. We take part to meetings. We take part to community dinners. We take part to congresses. We are at meetings like these here today. Why do we engage in these organizations? That's the bigger question, I guess, in this case. Most of us here, probably because we work for the sector, so that's why we are engaged. Who here works for an association? Ish. Okay, right. From those who did not raise their hands, where do you work in, if I may just... Is that microphone on? Yes.
I raised it.
You were raised, okay. Sorry. Where do you work, if I may? You were not for an association, right?
No, I work with associations, but I am a meeting planner.
Okay, meeting planners. Okay, so we have got a couple of people from the supplier side as well here. The question, obviously, why do you engage with the associations? I guess it's again part of your job. We do not have any volunteers in here, I guess. As you're one of the volunteers.
Director of a volunteer association. So.
Okay. Are you full-time employed by them, or are you?
The association has no employees.
Right. Okay.
It's a volunteer association, and I'm one of the directors.
All right. So why did you engage out of interest?
It was in. I'm not by profession a meeting planner. It was in my area of research, et cetera, and we formed an association in order to organize a conference in a particular research area.
Okay. So definitely a social reason as well in this case to be part of that one. You raise your hand as well.
I also work with an association which works for micro, small, and medium entrepreneurs. We help them to make their small business into big business. It's a non-profitable organization.
Right.
You know, the reason is my joining is, as you asked him, I have taken a lot from the society, and this is my time to give back. Okay. That's why I'm working there now.
Very good, very nice social reason as well, obviously. So now we've had a couple of reasons. Why do we engage? I'm currently engaged in writing a research paper on generations in association and in the non-profit sector, and it is quite astounding to see how much, or at what rate, in fact, civic engagement is declining at this point. The newer generations, the younger generations coming in, do not anymore engage as much as the generations before them. which currently brings me therefore also to the notion of, do we see a shift in how we actually measure generations? Can we only go by, as I said, the traditionalists, the baby boomers, the Gen X's, et cetera, or do we need to actually start looking at shorter time periods as well within an organization? Social psychology and organizational psychology suggests that in the fast-paced world of associations, because that's the one sector where associations are quite fast, is when they renew their boards. Their associations usually renew their boards, on average, I'm saying, not everyone, but on average they renew their boards a lot faster than a corporate entity. If we're now looking, for example, at the main difference in leadership, a corporate organization has board members that serve well up to 8 years, let's say, and then they're being changed. Whereas their manager, their CEO, usually stays on average for 2 to 3 years. In associations, this is exactly the inverse. The boards change every year, every 2 years, every 3 years, and the management stays on. And that is definitely one of the main points of should I say, of conflict sometimes between management and board. And therefore, when we're looking at associations, whenever a new board comes into power, a board is usually the representative body of its membership. We can usually see a shift in thinking again. So where we're now starting to look at, when we're talking about civic engagement on an academic level, that we would see maybe there's a generational shift already in there. So we're looking at much shorter periods of how generations influence the running of associations. Very well. The first thing that I would like now to have, in order to explain you also the concept of the ESAE peer-to-peer format, which is why I insisted on you trying to cluster around the tables a little bit, is to have now you think a little bit about what do generations actually mean to you, how do they influence you, how do you define generations in your own personal, professional environment. Is that we now looked at the social generations. I now made that call that yes, we might need to look at a slightly different model perhaps in the future, especially with a view on that we see that there is a strong declination of engagement by younger people, be it because of technology, be it because of general, I don't know, social shifts. We will find that out. The main question right now is, how do you define generations? And I would like with that to address a couple of points. Because we do see generational differences in modes of engagement. Young people today, everybody in here, does anybody in here have children? Sort of like getting into the age of using smartphones and iPads and computers, definitely, I guess. Computers are old-fashioned. The modes of engagement happen a lot differently, I guess, today. We all can see that. Also the people that don't have kids. I don't have kids, sorry. But you can see it all around. People are on their smartphones. They don't talk to each other anymore. We don't call each other anymore. We prefer to write a quick text message or an email. It's a little bit less personal. We don't have to engage that much. It's also, possibly it's seen as being polite, not to intrude on somebody. So there are definitely modes of engagement that have changed. Use of technology, again, we have smartphones. We are connected all the time via social media. And then the differences in codes of conduct as well. How do we talk to each other? And how do these codes of conduct differ from online to offline modes of interaction? If I may now ask each of the tables now to turn inwards and look at each other and perhaps make a quick round, introduce yourselves to one another and discuss how you experience the definition of generations, how they impact you. And if at the same time I may ask each of the tables to appoint, as the first thing, somebody who might report back to the group overall after 10 minutes. Is that okay? Yes, it's within your group, your definition of generations. Exchange with one another how this influences you, what you think about it. And then maybe if you can give back to the group after 10 minutes, just a short list of bullet points, you know. Is that okay? Oh yes, please be.
This is a lucky table.
thank you for doing this. I'll be in your room as well later on. I'll run around a bit. So no, it's good to have somebody to. Exactly, that would be one more.
I'm sorry, can I join you on this?
We don't mind late people, but you're the leader now.
The late people are sometimes the ones with the fresh ideas, you know. they're doing it quite well. They're introducing each other, but at the same time they say, what for them, the specialty about association of generations is. It's actually quite good. We've got 1 more minute. could I slowly start to ask you to wrap up the discussions? And once you sort of think that you are at a good point, raise your hands when you think you're ready, so that we can start to move on then. Because I heard a couple of really interesting statements on each of the tables that I definitely think would be worth pointing out. Right. Before we move on, I just want to reassure you that there will be a second round of discussions in terms of the how-to as well, like how do you engage with them. Now, this was about how do you define the generation, how do you work with them, again, the different modes of engagement through technology, yes or no, what are the pros and cons, etc. Then the how-to really, like how do you really engage with them and not just differentiate them, that will be a second stage. Now, if I might just hear back from all of the tables, we are 4 tables, so I guess that should give us a good time. Can I just appoint a table here and just report back to the group? Very good, thank you.
Hello. I'm afraid we came up with more problems than solutions.
Always good.
But one thing we spoke about a lot was the fact there are generational age factors. And we talked about, well, if we're doing social media, you've got to have somebody that's 15 doing it. But why? And we asked that question, why do we prejudge that? Is that really the reality? In our association, we're starting to build personas with, they have age information in there, but some older members of our association are quite adoptive of technology and how they want to be communicated to. Are we using mobile apps and how people interact with different kinds of communication, email, text and all that sort of stuff. Also, different points of view and culture we've thought had a big impact on how people want to engage with us. So I think that's roughly what we spoke about.
All right. Thank you very much. Very informative. Let's just make a round. I suggest from this table. Still at the note-taking. Good.
Good morning, all. My name is Gordon McDonald. I'm from Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. Way on the east side of the country. Some of the conversations that we had here had to do with certainly the different generations. Everybody around the table, there's a number of different entities here, from this gentleman who's involved in a family business to this gentleman who's involved, pardon me, I don't know the names, but who's involved in an airline, to a couple of different associations. And myself, I worked for what's called a Crown Corporation, which is a provincial municipal combination to manage a convention center. So there's quite a variety of different perspectives at this table alone, but one of the things that we did establish is that we're all here kind of for the same reason, and that is to better understand the influence of the multiple generations that are in our workplace. I was mentioning a comment in my own workplace. I've only actually been on the job for about 3 weeks, and in that time period there have been 3 individuals who have retired with over 30 years experience on the job. So there's a wide variety of people from all age groups within the building, and the other extreme is in our catering or banquet department. There's individuals who are just out of university. Entirely different expectations of the workplace within those. So essentially, just to wrap up, we're all here to better understand that. That's our purpose. I'm not exactly sure if that was the goal of our exercise, but that's where we got in our conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We hope definitely by the end of the session that we all will know better. Yep.
We've also got quite a variety of experiences around the table. We were discussing the different behaviours which we see from family and friends, what I think we agreed was there's certainly indicative behaviour from certain generations, although there are exceptions to that. to give two examples, my grandmother is 96, and she's. We gave her a mobile phone a few years ago, and she put it safely in the drawer for emergencies. So there's no point in texting her or calling her on it. In the same, as opposed, as an alternative to that, Tony's grandmother shops online. So I think from that we were mindful that even though there are indicative behaviours, it's important not to tarnish everybody with the same brush.
Yep.
We also discussed the different codes of conduct of communication as well. Again, looking at generational gaps. My grandmother, again, she will write to people, and she'll speak to people on the phone, and she'll talk to people. She will talk to random strangers. It fills me with dread. But she'll sit on a bus, or even at a bus stop, and just start talking to someone about the weather or something the council have done to dig up the roads or something. Whereas I now, if I want to talk to somebody, I'll text them first, and I'll say, "Oh, are you free to talk?" And I think we want to, because now perhaps having a telephone conversation can be seen as an inconvenience sometimes.
Very good, very good. I think that's a very good reflection in this case. I mean, I noticed that sometimes in myself. Somebody's trying, now that we can actually see who's calling us, I don't want to talk to that person right now. And so we all know sort of when to overstep the border and when not, I guess. Thank you so much for that. The last but not least table, obviously. Thank you. Exactly.
No, it's actually dying on me or something. I'm Keith Francis, and in our table we just essentially identified one problem with regard to generations, and that was the fact that for several of our organizations we are wondering about ways to reach out to our younger members, however we define younger, and we noticed the fact that there's a difference between the way in which older members think about the organization and even control the organization, and the impact that younger members might have. And we wondered about things like attrition. How do you keep younger members, and what do you do? And we did not answer the question. We just raised it.
That's fine. I don't think that there's an easy answer to that question in any case. Because again, a lot will also depend, like in my experience at least, on how you run your every individual association. It's sometimes, as I said, it does depend on your main audience as well, of course, how you engage and how you retain members as well. There's definitely one thing that we've also seen at the ESAE now that we're also doing a little bit more and more research into that. Because the reason why we're doing this kind of research now is that the ESAE was at the brink of extinction. The reason for extinction was dinosaurism. We had just aging people, no fresh blood coming in. People were just retiring and then or eventually jumping off. And the way the ESAE was working just didn't cut it anymore in the modern times. And that's why I put now this little image there as well, how the two roads of engagement, it's very simplistic, so just don't worry about it too much in detail. But just to show a little bit about how we try and engage at this point, we as a society overall, with the onslaught of the very, very successful TED Talks, for example. Whereas earlier, the first road of engagement was, you have a problem, you address it with logic, you analyze it as well. We still analyze it as well, of course, but we don't necessarily take things for granted as much. We go much deeper in our analysis. Whereas then, the second road was then the rhetoric about it. So we still all know probably that university professor that stood there in the front of the auditorium, 700 students sitting there, me in the very, very back. And he's literally just reading from his book, looking at his book, and we could have just all stayed at home reading the same thing ourselves, connecting online, if the internet would have really existed at the time. Whereas now we need a much stronger engagement. We want the story behind it. We want a design. We want to see something special. I heard one of the tables discuss this earlier. I think it might have actually been you. where what we now, with this mass of information out there, what we want is basically somebody to give us the gist, the bullet points, the 7 best practice points of how to do social media, the 10 best points of how to attract new members, etc., etc. That's what we want right now. We don't want to go through the entire rhetoric anymore. And that is definitely, especially in the association business, one of the big shifts that we're seeing from an older generation handing over to the younger one that is in itself a little bit more dynamic now, has all the information at the tips of their finger, and you will have a great opportunity to experience that this afternoon with Stefania here when you're building your own app. This is where we are going, and the transition from the old rhetoric-based generation to the new design and storytelling-based generation is a difficult one, apparently. Now, therefore, again, the question of attrition was mentioned as well. Do we see that there's a disengagement of youth in public life? I don't necessarily think so. It's just happening on a different level. I currently hope so. We do see a disengagement on the political sphere. A lot of people today, and this is something I'm generalizing again, but statistics do back me up on this case when looking at social statistics on engagement in political programs. The younger generations are no longer as much concerned with public life as the generations before them, their parents and their grandparents. In associations, we used to define it as the generation baby boomers, for example. I'm staying at the age differentiation for the time being. They were the ones who asked, okay, I'm in this association now, what can I do for this association? Whereas we've made the experience that the younger the new members became, the more there was a shift to a question of what can the association do for me? So a lot more centering around the individual rather than the social group. Yes, the question.
No, I just want to know, does this also somehow relate to community? Because the younger generation is more willing to be mobile for a job or for spontaneous reasons than the older generations, that they don't feel that they're part of a community. Have you done any connection to community and commitment?
We have a little bit, and there are, in fact, the session after this at 1 o'clock will address that question a bit more. They will really go into the community building processes as well. It's a session done by 2 very excellent speakers. In fact, they are specialized in community building, so I do recommend you go there. Yes, there is, you do see it when you read through the papers and everything, you see there's a bit of a disengagement. However, there is still a large group of people that still stay at home in the village where they were born. Still, I mean, young people of today. In fact, sometimes even moving further out into places that are quaint. Not everybody moves to the next big city. So even though while we do see, for example, in the UK, London swallowing up everything and being like, it's no longer a competition, but it's really sucking the life out of the rest of the UK, which is sometimes, of course, politicians sometimes do like to use these very dramatic words. But there is a certain truth about that, yes. If a city can attract people because there are opportunities in there and the opportunities are no longer on the countryside, yes, then you do see definitely that drain. But at the same time, you see, I think, a shift also. A lot of people are moving out again and creating communities out there, and these communities are changing. So while there was a time where these communities, for example, would see declining healthcare services as well because everybody was moving out, only elderly people stayed behind, which the corporate sector didn't really deem necessary to support too much because it would just be too expensive. There is a slight reverse tendency at this point. I can't give you any data on that, though, because it's not really one of my specialty areas, I have to admit. In the US right now, however, that is where on the political scale, and that's where most of the data is coming in at this point, young people don't vote anymore. They don't engage in politics that much anymore. And because also one of the reasons that one of the academics suggested why they don't do it is because they have become a little bit too self-centered in the sense that we are on our mobile devices, we are our profiles on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on whatever. And we stand right next to a person, and we're talking to that person via Facebook. We're not engaging directly anymore. We're not necessarily engaging on the actual problems that there are. We don't actually address the problems necessarily. This is what was put forward by a couple of academics now, and they have collected a bit of data that would actually support that. Now, I do hear also from you, and as at the ESAE as well, we had to do a lot of rethinking on how do we re-engage the younger people as well, and giving them an opportunity to actually raise their voice. It's not that they didn't have that opportunity before, but I think some just might need a little push to express themselves a little bit more because they just didn't have it before. The question of language is definitely very important. Again, moving on from rhetoric to storytelling. Storytelling is definitely something that now is sort of the big buzzword in all kinds of events that we are currently having. And this is one of the main attraction points to get young people to come and tell your story, tell how it was for you. I don't want to read it in a book where some people just give me all the empirical data on it. I don't need to know the statistics about it. I want to hear your personal story because this is what counts today. The Facebook generation literally looks at itself as the generation that is the special ones. When we grew up as kids, probably it was still so. I guess a lot of you know that this is this very bland explanation, very bland example as well. When the parents just said, "Kids, out. We don't want you in the house. You just go out and play. Just stay out of my way. I've got things to do." Whereas today, probably our generation, a bit younger, that have kids, the kids are the center of the family, have become the center of the family. The Facebook profiles show that very much. Everybody is just there. It's basically impression management. And with that rises the pressure also on oneself to actually deliver up to what I've now been telling there on my Facebook profile, how good I am. And there is a certain tendency that one becomes very self-absorbed with that. And one becomes very, very special in this, but also very insular at the same time. And there's a bit of a risk with the engagement. So what kind of language is being used? I just read a couple of days ago that in the US, a teenager got killed because she unfriended somebody on Facebook. It's rather extreme, but apparently it happens. And so then when we're looking at different modes of engagement now in terms of communication, when we are face-to-face, so offline, when we're engaging with somebody, I think, I'm not just throwing it out in the room, I'm not saying that it is like that, but I'm throwing it out in the room for discussion's sake as well. I think that we have become, we are still quite aware of politeness. We don't necessarily want to intrude on somebody else's private space, and we just let them be, as you just said, as the example, I send a text message first, can I talk? So, you still make sure that when you're confronting somebody face to face, you're not necessarily making it in a very abrupt way, but you're still polite. Online, we've seen that etiquette is definitely missing. People are much more ready to accuse people of something, as ridiculous as it may be, and be rather direct about it. And therefore, the entire problem of online e-reputation and in fact, really, character murders online, it has become a huge problem. And I think that is something where we see the changeover from the generations now as the technology is evolving more and more. I wonder if any of you may have had similar experiences. In fact, you mentioned something very, very nice earlier. I just heard you when you said, like, we're not all on Facebook, we're not all on LinkedIn. We also like to go to the pub and talk to people directly. Can I hear that one from you once more to the rest of it? It's an encouraging statement, I think.
Well, yeah. What I said here is, I think, what did I say, right? No.
We're young, we don't want to, we want to in the public world.
Exactly. It was said here that the young generation should, that we are all so in touch on social media, etc. And I said, well, maybe we aren't as much as the older generations think that we are, because we do like to meet each other in person.
Very good. Can I lead over straight away to the last discussion round for 5 minutes? Around the tables once more. How do you engage your different groups of your membership? Do you have a best practice example that you could share with one another at your table? Or do you have a question? And then if you have a question, maybe after 5 minutes, I see I'm running a little bit late. After the 5 minutes of discussion, let's come back with the questions and see if we can find some answers to that. If that is okay? All right. And yes, you do have free Wi-Fi here.
Yeah, me too. Don't worry, I'll be.
No. No worries, thank you so much.
No, no, for the next one.
One more minute, please. Okay, if we could slowly start thinking about wrapping up the discussion and reporting back to the group. I see one group is already coming to an end. Okay. Thank you very much for this. I said, where are we going with all of this now? How do we engage our members? At the ESAE, we asked ourselves this question as well. How do we engage? We came to the conclusion we need to change our membership. Can't always just do it like that easily. But no, in fact, what we do is we try and engage our membership differently to what we used to do before, trying to possibly move away from the old-fashioned membership model where everybody just pays an annual membership fee in order to have access to some sort of resources, maybe, that you can now find for free on the internet anyway. So what we are currently doing is we're actually having an internet revolution in our own structure. We're trying to offer more online facilities, in fact, for people to come together, a more social network online as well, where we do share information from one of another that you don't necessarily find on the internet just by browsing. And at the same time, trying to therefore not play gatekeepers via an amount that you pay once a year or you don't, but actually be more willing to share information freely amongst the people that actually need to benefit from it. Because this is what we ultimately are here about, I think. And this is also what the younger generations, what we've seen, actually want. They want to have access to things, but they can't necessarily pay for it either. I mean, we just had a credit crunch anyway. And at the same time, how easy do you want it to make for people to engage with you and to hand over information from a generation that is moving out of the workforce slowly to a new generation that is coming in? Now, before I tell any more about us, could I make a quick round of the tables? What were your findings? How do you engage? We are running a little bit late. I'll just make it very short. Everybody just 2 or 3 bullet points.
We made a couple of points with LinkedIn groups and such that give people an area to discuss and ask questions. Does that nullify part of the association's reason for being there? If younger members can communicate online, how does that leave us? Mm-hmm. Then we talked about associations and us changing to accommodate that and talking to different sets of users or members within our associations.
Right. Very good. Thank you very much. I think this is definitely a tendency that we can see. How do we engage them? Do we lose something when we engage them online? Yeah, probably a little bit. But on the other hand, it's about us to repackage content. I think the relevance for content is definitely still there. Can I hand over?
2 topics we spoke of, and one had to do with the youth of today teaching older generations new technology. Whereas at one point, this is really well demonstrated in your comment, whereas at one point you would have a tradesman who would teach a younger person, an apprentice, the skills. Now that is changing where you have younger people who are teaching older generations such as mine skills with technology. The other element that we spoke of, it was my personal comment on mine, but when it comes to technology, much like this gentleman who likes to go to the pub, I prefer to have my communication one-on-one, direct wherever possible. So rather than having an email exchange that just frustrates the heck out of me, or text messages that I can't quite understand what they mean, or they could mean 2 or 3 different things, I ask anyone who I work with to just come and talk to me. Let's have face-to-face conversations so there's genuine dialogue and understanding in the room. Before we exit that meeting, then there's a summary of where we are and where we're going, and that's clarity. That's the way I prefer to do it. Simply for 2 reasons, clarity as I touched on, but also it's a huge time saver. Like, it just saves me personally a lot of time in doing so. So I think that's anything else we touched on?
Thank you very much. So I'm taking away from you the clarity of the mode of communication. Definitely a very important point. I'll hand over to you.
We discussed a couple of things which we had done to help engagement. One client which I have had their conference a few weeks ago, and they used the conference app. It's the second year they did it, but they didn't provide any printed material at all this year. So actually they forced the membership to engage with them electronically.
Yep.
So, may I ask you a question? How do you do when people don't have tablets or smartphones? Because that still happens.
They all had smartphones or tablets,
Okay, then that's very
They knew in advance it was going to happen. So that was, yeah, we were surprised, but it went down very well.
Okay.
The other thing we discussed was sometimes doing something a bit different can stand out. So Tony was saying she writes personal letters to thank her vendors.
Mm-hmm. So still the personal touch to
Yeah.
it, obviously, engagement. Very good point. Thank you very much. And then the last table before we close the... You're still there?
Yeah, we're all leaving. We talked about several ideas for engaging members, but one of them was regular use of social media,
Right.
so that younger members had a chance to talk about the organizations. But actually, one of the most interesting ideas we had was my colleague over here, so I should really let her explain what it was that they do.
Hi, so my name is Khattameetha. I work for EFMA, which is, it used to be a European Financial Marketing Association, but nowadays we are just EFMA because we're being more and more global. So our members are mainly banks. So I was mainly explaining them that we had like online tools that we used, like webinars and think tanks where people could gather and share their ideas. And we also try to have more and more like disruptive meetings, which is very hard. But I think that in the coming future we'll definitely see more and more events that will need to be completely different from what we do nowadays, like theater, classroom, and to attract this younger generation and this future like members as well that are from the Generation Y. Mm.
Okay, so restructuring, rethinking the architecture of your meetings, definitely. Okay, very good point. So I think all of you have made very sensible suggestions. Of course, I think this is definitely also the tendency where we're all going. Again, of course, there's no one-fits-all solution. Unfortunately, we can't brush over everybody with the same brush. Unfortunately, not. But definitely, there's something that we will have to think about, which is really the mode of engagement. How direct, face-to-face, what is appropriate at the end of the day in order to jump the generation gap, in order to hand over. I think a lot also will have to do definitely from the goodwill to actually hand over in a way that is acceptable, also to be received by a younger generation again. So just to be open about everything and meet every now and then in a pub rather than on Facebook. Thank you, that was a very good one. I was in Dublin last week, yes, we did a lot of pubs. God. So thank you very much for the session here today. I'm sorry for having run over a little bit the time. These are my contact details in case you want to get in touch with us. Said we are preparing every now and then a new research paper on a couple of topics, or if you want to be part of something, it would be very nice to be. Thank you very much and have a successful show. Thank you so much for that.